Welcome, everybody, to today's Silver Consolidated School District Work Session Meeting. Today is February 17th, 2020. The time is 5:30. Mr. Hernandez, would you do a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Flores?
Here.
Mr. McMillan?
Here.
Mr. Khan?
Here.
Dr. Diaz? Here. Mrs. Montenegro? Here.
Thank you. The only item on our agenda tonight are the board goals. And I will start by just telling the board that our research, Mr. Hernandez got the minutes of the work session from April of last year. We talked about finalizing the board goals. Doesn't mean that these are, just to refresh your memories, you guys can come up with whatever you would like. But Mr. McMillan went over the following draft board goals that were presented at the January 21st work session meeting. And it was academics. And under the academics, the bullet points were dual credit enrollment, the CTE program, graduation rates, attendance rate increased by 2%. And then finance was another goal. Under finance, the bullet points were operational budget at 85% for staffing, and then the cash carryover at 5.26%. The third goal was extracurricular programs. The only bullet point under that was student longevity participation rates. And the fourth one was with regards to the board itself. And the bullet points for that were to maintain at least getting 8 continuing education credits instead of the minimum 5 required. And then the alignment of board policies, I know Michelle's talked about that. And then the last one was board community relations. And that's what we had during the last, again, this was talked about April 15th, 2019, and again, that was talked about before that, prior to that, January 21st of 2019, so it's been a little over a year that we discussed this. I recommend that we come up with a minimum of 4, not to exceed 6, but I'll leave it at the pleasure of the board.
Mr. President, so I don't know if we want to speak to what we've actually covered on these. I know we don't have time to go into a lot of detail with that, but just going through like a quick checklist to see.
Sure.
And then going on to what we want the new goals to look like. I personally would like the new goals to look more concrete. I think like the percentages we had or those numbers, I think that was really good, the way we laid them out. And I should say similar, because I like that they're concrete goals that we can measure, say we did it or we didn't. We need to figure out how to revamp.
Yeah, I think we'll just start outlining the goals. I think in thinking about this, whether it's too simple or not, but I think a good goal for the board itself is training. I think we need to be trained in maybe different aspects of what our responsibilities as a board really are, and maybe how we've sort of gotten away from that and maybe pull us back in to stay aligned with the requirements of the board. That'd be one of the goals that I recommend, and it could be training covering that and other aspects too. But I think we do need a training session, and we can get one of the attorneys from our firm to come down and give us a training at, I think, maybe at a work session, or I don't want to pull you guys off on your own time, but maybe a work session, have an hour or half an hour training, something.
Can we see if that would count as credit toward our education?
Absolutely,
credits?
absolutely.
I mean, it's ideal if we can capitalize on that. I wrote down 5 board goals, and they're not really new from the last time we talked. I want to speak to some that we already had, because I think they're important goals that we haven't yet attained, but we've worked on a lot of parts to them to get there. But the board goals that I wrote down, number 1 was community engagement. And I think we've been working on that and trying to advertise what's actually going on in the district, so that we can get those members of the community that would like to participate and have them come and engage in that. So I think that's part of it. I have not been yet, but I know I had talked about maybe going to the Silver Daily Press. They put activities for different community events, so I was wondering if they would be willing to put in those things, and it doesn't have to be, Silver Schools exclusive, but they put a lot of other community events in the paper, so maybe they could include the educational events like the concerts or the sports events in that community event calendar that they have.
I can tell you, I asked Mr. Clough to talk to Mr. Seibel, and he's made contact. Did you want to give a brief update?
Well, I had a brief conversation with him at Grant County Day. He's open to it, and he's even more open if our kids are the kids reporters to reporting the information to the paper. So we could tie two things together with one. So, once session is over, probably be the best time to approach him with that.
And my only concern, and not that kids won't know, but as the adults supporting that program, we need to make sure they have accurate data, because the only thing worse than notifying the public is giving them misinformation. So make sure it's accurate and up-to-date information, and that it's inclusive. It's not just the sports, or not just the concerts, or not just the, whatever the event is, but that it's really inclusive of the district's events that week.
Okay.
So, and I know there are other ways we can do that. I was just sharing with Mr. Brown that there are different people, including providers in the community, that have stepped up, and they're involved at a state level in different community programs that, and some of them have funding and some don't. But in trying to really capitalize on those state level resources and how we can take advantage of them at a local level is one thing to look at. And I think there are some providers in town that have been willing to touch base, and so I've asked them to get into contact with Mr. Brown so we can try to capitalize on that as well. So appreciative to those people stepping in too. And on that same note, my number 2 is to close loops in communication. I think, as a board, we come up with different items that have come up, or that we want researched, or that we need to research ourselves, or whatever the issue is. And I'm not sure it always comes full circle so that the entire board is aware of what that answer came to be. Or if there's an item that we need to follow through on. So one of them was like when Mr. Coker came and did the follow-up for the 5-point GPA. I mean, that's kind of a classic example because that's an easy one. But we had that loop closed, so that was a nice, that felt good that we could kind of have closure to that, know what came to be. So I think that part's really important, and it makes us a functional board, but it also lets us know that we're following through on these goals. And then I'll just line item the rest because I'm talking too much, but the third one was really working on district handbooks policy so that there's consistent progressive discipline. And number 4, salary schedule. What did I write here? Principal, I'll have to come back to tell you about that. Oh, principal salary, that's a tiered salary. And I know
We're talking
Michelle,
about
yeah,
that.
just right about that. Good, so that was on our list. And then my 5th one was more of a personal one. Listen more, talk less. That's working out. And then to be on time. To be on time. And then the 6th one just speaks to all those, but it's really about working towards stability of the district.
Well, I can appreciate all of them, especially them being on time. No, I'm just kidding. No, I was gonna say especially the salary schedule, because I think at times we do talk about the salary, maybe not enough, but I think more so, I realize too, maybe my fault is that we don't talk about the salary. I know the union, prevents us from giving raises to certain people, but I think salary from the bottom all the way up, not just the principals and teachers, but also the support staff. And I'll give you an example. And maybe they think that I'm harping on the cafeteria workers. We talk about the food issue, but I know that group of people, along with other groups of people, they work really hard. And I know they don't get paid what they deserve. And I don't think anybody really gets paid what they deserve. But if you take that group of people and say, well, let's look at your salary and how can we improve your quality of life by giving you a raise? And maybe it's not the principal or teachers at that time, maybe it is the support staff. And I think if we look at it as a board to a group like that, they may not feel as important as the principal at times, but they are, in my opinion, equally as important. I think sometimes we don't mention them enough. I mentioned the activity drivers, the last board meeting, and like I said, I'm guilty of it all, mostly not really giving a lot of credit to a lot of people, but I looked at activity drivers at a trip, and I just thought, man, these guys sit here the whole tournament, they're tired, and they could sit in the bus and sleep, but they're very, proactive, taking pictures, motivating the kids. I think me, sometimes a parent, just take it for granted that they'll always be there, and someday they're not gonna be there. But those groups of people, I think we should really look at some point in the future, saying, hey, we want to give you a raise, not just the 2% that the governor gave every state employee, or the 3%, whatever that percentage, but let's look at giving you guys a raise. It'll really, I think, just make them feel more appreciated. But I appreciate the salary schedule, thank you.
When we talk about the tier portion, are we talking about like a 1 year versus a 2 year versus a 3 year? Is that what we're talking about when we're
What
talking?
we're looking, is, right now, it's a standard, whatever the salary is,
Your
whether you have
education.
any experience, yeah. So we were talking about, because the state sets minimums,
Mhm.
to start at the state minimum, and then have like a midpoint if you have 2 years experience, or, we'll have to determine the number of years experience. And then if you're a tenured, principal, then by all means, you would hit the top category, But at least have a little bit of something to work towards, because all of our administrative salary schedule is a single line salary schedule. It does not give credit for experience.
Mr. President, I think to add on to that, we did have increases from the state this last year, but, and something that I did wanna, bring up was I don't think we've looked at our, and I wanna call it stipend, but it's, not
Increment.
stipend, increment, schedule. That's something I don't think we've looked at, and I don't think we increased, or have increased in some time, so that would be something I think to make sure we include when we look at salary schedules or.
Initially, years ago, when I first started working here, it was directly tied to the minimum teacher's salary. And as it was harder to give just base raises, we kind of let that go. And so, no, it's not tied to anything, and it hasn't seen an increase in a while. And coaches and activity sponsors do a lot for our kids.
Anything else?
No,
Anybody else?
One thing that we talked about a lot pretty early on whenever I was on the board was board self-evaluation. We've never done one that I can remember. And I know we have a tool in one of our policies to do some board self-evaluation, but it does help to just get us to reflect on where we are and how we feel like we're doing as a board. It talks about like community engagement, it talks about training, it talks about, it's pretty inclusive, so I would say maybe we should all kind of look at that, see if it feels like it still could be applicable, and do something like that in a board retreat type situation where we just all kind of do some self-reflection on us as a whole board.
And just going through the old goals, under academics, I know we're still working on dual credit, and I kind of hopped on board with the PAC meetings at the high school, trying to participate in that. That is really at the very top of the list for the high school PAC meetings right now. And so we just have to basically we've had a few meetings, I missed the last one, but we did the 5.0 scale and had a long talk about that. Then the next big thing, so to speak, is the dual credit and trying to coordinate that so it's, again, consistent. We're not just saying, oh, you can do it and you can't, and this is what yours is gonna look like. We're trying to maintain some consistency, and also so that parents and students have an idea of what they, what that framework looks like to know if they wanna participate. The CTs, I know that's good. And then, I don't know about the rates as far as that is concerned, but I just wanted to speak to the dual credit under those. No, it's still being looked at. Oh, and the one other thing under the board goals that we had before, the 8 continuing education credits. I know we talked about trying to work on more professional development. But I thought we said that 8 seemed a bit steep, because it is really hard to come by even the 5, I'm just gonna be honest. You gotta go to out of town at least a couple times. Sometimes it's down the street and you're lucky, and sometimes it's, Quemado with a flat tire. So I personally, the 5 is, I'm happy to look at enrichment, but really I think moving it formally at the 5 is what I thought we had discussed in later meetings.
Mr. President, in looking at or reviewing our previous goals, I think under academics, the dual credit, the CTE program, and the graduation rates, we were wanting to get kind of a baseline at that time to see what that baseline was, so then we could determine how we wanted to measure or what kind of goal we wanted to set for each of those. And I know, and I thought I was looking at a school district report card from the PED from 17-18, and I thought they had typically had attendance in this, but I don't see it listed in this report. But I think that and our graduation rates is something that's reported on. And then I would think our dual credit would be something that we would be able to get, how many kids are engaged in dual credit courses, to get a baseline on those numbers, and then we can come back and say, okay, this is what we've done for the past 2 years or 3 years. I know CTE is kind of just taken off right now, but getting a measurement, kind of a baseline on those areas under academics. And then with the change in the executive at the state level, I'm kind of disappointed that we did away with the district grades and the school grades. I thought the A, B, C, D, F was an easy thing to understand and for all of us, and that's gone away. So I think we've kind of yet to see what kind of measurement tool the state is going to use or PED is going to use moving forward. But I don't know what group would measure this, if it would be the state or if it's outside organizations, but I would say shooting for a top 10, being a top 10 district in our state would be a goal worthy of setting.
I think, you mentioned the baselines. I think obviously we need to get the baseline numbers so we can compare the numbers. And I think if we can get a baseline by next board meeting, and then we can continue from that meeting, and then we can measure it against that number. And that's how we close the loop on that.
So I can, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Instead of just saying, okay, we're gonna do it, and then 3 or 4 meetings go by and we sort of haven't done it, we just said, okay, by next meeting, we'll have the baseline numbers, and then we'll set our goal based on the numbers that we received from that meeting. Good.
Sorry, Mr. President. So I think the baseline, it's good to have those, but I think those numbers are going to be pretty raw. And part of the issue that we found when we were discussing this in PAC at the high school is that there are lots of kids that want to engage, but there's no real set framework or rules. It's like, if you want to sign up, we'll figure out how to put it in your schedule. I mean, and a lot of people have approached myself, Mrs. Beck, and the administration, but since we don't have a formal framework, that part has been difficult. So I think the baseline may not really speak to the opportunity is my only point. And I think if the framework is there, we may see an increase. And the other thing I will say is people were looking at the dual credit as directly obstructive to AP courses at the high school. So there are also several teachers at the high school looking to become endorsed as far as AP instructors. So they're actually looking at trying to accommodate both sets of students right now. But they do, if you go take the dual credit, then are you really going to take the AP? So that has also been something that is hard to sort out. And I think they're really just trying to speak to the individual student. The one thing I will say is if there are 2 people that want to take the AP English course, I think we should be willing to accommodate them just like we do a child with a separate special need. And some of those classes will have 2 people, right? But are we as a district willing to put our necks out there to accommodate those 2 students that are trying to to, better themselves. So that has been a topic that has come up.
So let's, but I think we still, even though the numbers are raw, we still need something to go by. Yeah, and we can discuss that, but,
So specifically, we're talking about dual credit enrollment, like how many students do enroll in dual credit?
yes,
And then graduation rates, what they have, what they were, like in 19.
sure.
Attendance rate, I would guess with that STARS coordinator, we should be able to figure that out pretty easily. Staffing, I'm sure Michelle knows that off the top of her head.
Let's get the budget first, Mrs.
I have
Lynn.
something, Mr. President. I feel, all these goals are good and all, and they're a very good idea, but we need to do attainable goals and probably rate those the easiest to the hardest so we can attain those goals. Because we can attain goals, but then they fall through the cracks, so we just don't follow up with that. So I feel what we all have discussed tonight, they're very good goals, but what we need to do is say, okay, what can we attain first, which is gonna be the easiest to the hardest, so we can attain those and accomplish those goals. With by looking at my notes here, just, I think looking our attainable goals to us as a board first, and then going to the next, like the 5 grade point average, attendance, and then just going little steps like that, so we can attain and reach our goals.
So let me put this up to you. If we could, within 5 minutes, if we can narrow this down to 4 or 5 goals that you think are attainable as a board, and we'll set them and close the loop, and then try to set a timeline to attain these goals.
Well, and I don't even think we've even set goals. Like, you're saying, let's get a baseline, let's find out what dual credit is. It's just going and getting data points at this point. I don't really feel like we have any quote unquote, like, goals. It's just, we want to work on these things. Right? Am I
So that's what I'm asking for,
confused?
is give me
Top
some
5.
things that we could say are gonna be our goals.
This is what we're gonna work on.
This is what we're gonna work on, what?
Yeah, I like that.
I'll give you my top 5.
I guess each of us can say one. There's 5 of us.
Okay, we'll start with you, Ashley.
Board self-evaluation.
Okay, all right.
Like the community engagement.
Okay, but on the board self-evaluation, let's try to find the tool that we can evaluate ourselves. And let's say by the July meeting, I'm just throwing that out there at the top of my head, is we'll have that goal completed, and we're gonna evaluate ourselves and talk about it by July,
That sounds great.
okay?
So someone's gonna give us that tool, or we?
I think it's somewhere, I'll look for it. Michelle, and I'll get to you, Patrick.
My number 1's community engagement.
Tell me how you define that.
So basically communicating events and opportunities for community participation.
Okay, so let's come up with a plan to get the information to the media, and maybe even put it on the marquee, on different types of websites, and we'll come up with a goal.
So should we make the goals and then talk about how we're gonna accomplish them at like the next work session? That's a lot for 30 minutes.
Yeah, let's just talk about this, okay, that's goal number 2, and we'll talk about it later. Does that sound good? Okay, Patrick?
I was incensed with Michelle on the community engagement, because we need to enrich our community, get that community engaged to events that are going on in our community. Also, as school board members, pushing out for the census, advocating for, like we did with the SB 9, letting our community know that who we represent. That's really important, because a lot of people don't know who we are, and we need to step up to that plate to let people know this is who we are, this is who we represent.
So the same as Michelle's?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Miller?
It's a top 10 district in the state.
And my goal will be board training. And that could also tie in with Ashley's goal with board self-evaluation.
Roger stole my goal, do I get another goal?
Oh, yes, we don't have 5.
I have
Go ahead,
a,
now.
Let's see.
I have a really concrete,
Okay, go ahead.
okay, you can choose.
No, throw it in there, we have room for one more, so Patrick,
So,
is,
one concrete one is updating handbooks and policies for consistent progressive discipline. And the other one would be the closing loops and communication.
okay, so to close the loop on this, I think we need to pick out a work session, maybe next month, it depends what we have going on, to discuss these goals and find out how we're gonna achieve these goals. Does that sound good to you?
Do you want to?
So what's our 4th one then? Is it closing the loop? We're gonna go with closing the loop?
Or the handbook?
Updating the handbook policies.
Is number 5?
And can we make sure it says for consistent progressive discipline? Please, thank you, Linda.
Which one is it for?
The training for the board.
Training?
Oh, I missed that.
Anything else?
Mr. President, looking at the policies now, it looks like there's in our policies B-0100, BAA evaluation of school board self-evaluation.
Does it look updated, Mike?
I don't think that one
We didn't change it.
has been changed, no.
We can look at it, we don't have to necessarily stick to it, but we can look at it, use it as a tool, and maybe we want to come up with our own, whatever best suits us. Can you email that to us, please?
Yes.
Okay.
I can email it, or I can try and email it. I was trying to figure out how to load it to an email.
Perfect.
Very well, anything else? I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Motion by Hash, Montenegro, do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Khan. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.